Welcome to Society Girl Saves the World for another round of discussion about anything related to the world of Desi cinema, Desi movies. Today's topic is a film which was released back in 1986, which is a huge rarity. It is a sprawling historical epic based on one of the truly reviled characters of recent history, and a film that is based on fact, but it's given a little Lollywood twist which makes it even more fascinating. Today's film is a revelation, starring Sultan Rahi and Mustafa Qureshi in the title role in and as Hitler, and it gives the old story of what happened to Hitler a little bit of a twist. All of you know, of course, that his body was never found, but Hitler, the Lollywood film, has all the answers. Rafiq Chaudhry, the producer of Hitler, announced the film with a certain amount of fanfare and a bit of a bash, which was to feature the stars of the movie and those people who were involved, including an actor who had become very popular by this time in Lollywood. Shahid was frontlining the star cast, but during this period he was having some personal issues and decided to quit Lollywood, and when the film's shooting came about, he was not a part of the setup. Despite the loss of Shahid, Hitler still boasted a fairly strong cast, with Sultan Rahi and Anjuman featuring in the major roles, but the title role was to be played by Mustafa Qureshi, and he was supported by Shahida Mini, Iqbal Hassan, Bahar, and notably Firdaus, who was making a little bit of a comeback in this film. And Firdaus, of course, some of you will know, recently passed away, was a huge siren and star of Lollywood in the 60s and the early 70s. This Lollywood 1986 version starts with a little bit of a prologue, a fascinating prologue to inform its audience a little bit about Hitler's antics so that they are familiar, and it explains how Hitler was responsible for a bunch of atrocities, the worst of which were the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Hitler da zulm तारीख दे मत्थे ते लग्या होया ओ काला दाग जिन्नू सत समंदर भी तोड़ना चाहण ते नहीं तो सकते हिरोशिमा दी तबाही नागासाकी दी बर्बादी मावां दे तड़प ते लाल बैणा दे सिसक दे वीर सुहागणा दे खुले वाल हिटलर दे जुल्म दियां सच्चियां तस्वीरां ने ओ मौत दा फरिश्ता बन के पूरी दुनिया ते कब्जा करन तुरया सी अज दा इंसान हुण भी ना समझिया ते दुनिया फिर कब्रिस्तान बन जाएगी, फिर रोवेगी, मौत फिर हंसेगी। ए उस इंसान दी कहानी है जेड़ा हिटलर दी लाश सूली ते वेख के भी कहंदा है हिटलर मरया नहीं, हिटलर जिंदा है, हिटलर जिंदा है, जिंदा है, जिंदा है।
The film explains that Hitler's body was never found, but it continues to tell you the story of what really happened. And according to the film, Hitler evidently escaped the horrors of World War II, managing to stay alive and somehow disguise himself to travel across the world and end up in Punjab in Pakistan. And during his travels, he had the time to feel a certain amount of remorse about the terrible things that he had committed. And by the time he arrives in Pakistan, he is a changed man from the evil monster that he was a few months ago, he seems to have had a complete change of attitude and is now a peacemonger. But sadly, he finds that even in Pakistan, evil exists, and some nasty landlords get after him and try and extort money from him which he cannot pay, and they end up murdering him. And now, as the reformed and peace-loving Adolf Hitler lies ironically bleeding from his gunshot wounds in the field in Punjab, he's comforted by his wife and his young son. But now he instructs his wife and his son that in order for him to ever gain any peace, even in death, his son will have to come back to this very spot to take revenge for his murder. And young Adolf's son, by the name of Haku, now turns into Hitler Jr. and vows to avenge his dad at the very spot that his father's blood is seeping into the Punjabi soil.
हिम्मत ना हारी फातिमा वादा कर हाकू तूफान दी ऐस कुमन गेरी नु तू ते पैरां दी जंजीर बना के ओ जालिम नु इत्थे ले आके मारेगा जिथे ओने तेरे प्यो दा खून कीता है जे तू ए वादा ना पूरा कीता ते याद रखी मेरी रूह क़यामत तक आसमाना ते तड़पती रहेगी
Akhil Rubi's script has the young son of Adolf Hitler by the name of Haku turn into Hitler Jr. and now he creates a posse of thugs who go around terrorizing the local villages, extorting money and killing people for daring to stand in their way. Almost as heartless, brutal and murderous as his father used to be. In one of the opening scenes, the goons of Hitler go out to ravage a local village and are confronted by a man who is a man of peace and who begs them to stop what they're doing, but of course they don't listen.
प्यार मोहब्बत दी मेरी इस बस्ती नू ना उजाड़ो ये मासूम चेहरे ਜਿਹੜੇ ਰੱਬ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਹੱਥਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਬਣਾਏ ਨੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਨਫ਼ਰਤ ਦੀ ਅੱਗ 'ਚ ਨਾ ਸਾੜੋ ਰੱਬ ਦੇ ਕਹਿਰ ਕੋਲੋਂ ਡਰੋ ਰੱਬ ਦੇ ਕਹਿਰ ਤੋਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਡਰਾਉਣਾ ਨਾ ਤੂੰ ਕੌਣ ਹੈ
The man pleads with Hitler's goons not to destroy their village, but his words are met with disdain and he is shot brutally, cold-heartedly in front of the entire village. And when his best mate Sultan, played by Sultan Rahi, hears about his murder, he decides to take matters into his own hands, but his mother is an obstacle.
मां मेरे यार दे कितने सोहने ते सुच्चे ख्यालात ने इस दुनिया दे अमन च जंग दी अग बालन वाले जे ना शेरां नु सुन लगन तो ये जंग लड़नी बंद कर दे
तोपां ते बंदूकां दी जंग ते मुक्की जाएगी रोज जंग दा की बनेगा चढ़ी मैं गरीबी नाल भी लड़नी कदों हाथ पीले होणगे तेरी ऐस बहन दे कदों इनु डोली च बिठाएगा सोचा ते फिकरां दी आग कदों बुझेगी पुत्रा कदी ऐस जंग दा भी कोई तोड़ सोचे
Frau Hitler, played by Firdaus, hangs out at home with her son, and though she often wears a diamond-encrusted crown, she has no kingdom. Hitler Jr. seems to keep himself amused by changing his outfits every few minutes and coming up with the most breathtaking combinations and hairstyles. But his mother's crown doesn't sit easily, and she's suffering from a large amount of guilt, and insists that her son, Hitler Jr., give up his ways of thuggery and extortion and turn over a new leaf. This doesn't sit well with Hitler, who refuses and absolutely insists that he is going to carry out the vengeance that he had promised his dying father.
मौत की जुर्रत है कि मेरी आंखों विच आंखां पा के गल करे
गरूर न कर ओदे अजाब तो डर गरीबां दी हावां ते अर्श हिला दिंदियां ने तेरी की औकात है अजे भी कुछ नहीं बिगड़िया रब दे बुए बंदियां ते कदी बंद नहीं होए तौबा दे पानी नाल अपने गुनाहगार हाथ धो के ओदी रहमत तो बख्शिश मांग ले ओदी रहमत बख्श देवेगी
बुज़दिल न बना मां मैनू बुज़दिल न बना अजे ते मैं अमन दे उस दीवाने दी कब्र ते अपने जुल्म दा कतबा लाना है
याद रख जे तू जुल्म तो बाद ना आया ते तेनू भी दुनिया नफरत नाल याद करे
ए की कह रही है मां की कह रही है
जे मैनू पता हुंदा कि मेरा खून जवान होके बेगुनाहां दा कातिल बनेगा ते रब दी सौ मैं यह गुनाह कदी ना कर दी
मैं हाकू नहीं मां, मैं हिटलर हूं, हिटलर।
So, will Hitler Jr. avenge his father and then maybe turn a new leaf like his father did before him? Or will he continue the rampage and spread war and havoc and hatred and terror just like his father? Now the question remains, will Frau Hitler be able to persuade her son to give up the battle and turn to peace? Or will the warmongering evil ways of his father take precedence? Will the world have to face up to World War III? Or will there be peace in our time? Mustafa Qureshi, the consummate Lollywood professional, turns in a great performance as Hitler Jr. and is very much aided and abetted by his spectacular wardrobe, where each outfit is more stunning than the one before.
चवा बलावां नू इकट्ठा करिए ते एक वजूद बनदा है ते ओनू हिटलर कहंदे ने।
हिटलर नु लफड़ाया से ते फिर वेख के कबरा क्यों गया? हैरानी नाल की वेखे।
The chemistry, as it always is between Sultan Rahi and Mustafa Qureshi, is quite excellent. Anjuman and Shahida Mini both have roles that pretty much just decorate the film, and it's left to Firdaus and Bahar, the old-timers, with roles with much more substance. And if things weren't weird enough, there is a quite delightful scene where at night time Sultan Rahi, walking through the forest, is attacked by two very human-looking bears because they wear shoes, oddly enough. The film is a little bit of a warped history lesson, but it has its heart in the right place. And Mustafa Qureshi makes a better Hitler than Hitler himself, while Sultan Rahi shouts heroically at the top of his voice, and there are some man-eating killer bears in shoes, and a whole lot of other stuff to keep you well entertained. It is a sad shame that today Lollywood is pretty much redundant. Otherwise, we could perhaps look forward to a Punjabi version of a film about the life of Donald Trump, which would be very fascinating, and it would be interesting to see who would be cast as the role of the handsome Donald Trump. And so, in conclusion, I think that Idris Khan's Hitler has to be recommended as a film that is so ludicrous, so ridiculous, that it's actually fairly amusing. And the performance and the interpretation of the role of Hitler Jr., as played by Mustafa Qureshi, is pure genius. Props to the scriptwriter who has come up with something so fangled and so deliciously warped that it's a riot. There have been films subsequently made on international characters. A film in the 90s by the name of Jinnah, which didn't really hit the spot, starring Christopher Lee. There was a film about Benazir Bhutto, the assassinated Prime Minister of Pakistan, that also hardly ran in cinemas for a week. And there's a forthcoming film by the name of Kaptan about a famous sportsman turned politician that remains to be seen. But it seems that Hitler from 1986 is the film to beat and sets the benchmark. And this brings us to the end of another podcast from Society Girls Saves the World. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and you might consider coming back for some more of the same. Until then, stay safe. Bye-bye.
मैं कर्जा देके कभी वसूल नहीं कीता रुस्तम खान, कर्जे चढ़ांदा दिया ताकि सूद दा पार वधदा ही रहे।